Believe me, that German man who went to London in 1710 must have been quite surprised by what he saw. Imagine, he goes to a crowded corner of England. People are gathered. Everyone is excitedly watching a fight. But this is no ordinary boxing match. The fighters are exchanging punches with bare hands. No headbutts are forbidden, no eye gouging. It's simply a wild scrap. What's more, there are even women in the audience watching the fight. This man leans slightly towards a woman in the audience and asks, "What's a woman doing here?" Without hesitation, the woman tells him that she herself fought another woman here not long ago. Of course, the German man's jaw dropped. This moment is so remarkable that he makes a note of it in his diary, and that note goes down in history as one of the earliest known written sources on women's boxing in the Western world. Imagine, even women were fighting in the ring in London in the early 1700s. But the story doesn't end there. By 1722, the presence of women in the boxing world was becoming a little more widely known. An advertisement appears in one of the London newspapers. A woman named Elizabeth Wilkinson is challenging her rival, Hannah Highfield. Elizabeth is highly skilled not only in boxing, but also in weapons such as daggers, short swords, and quarterstaffs. While most female fighters of the time fought just to entertain the audience, Elizabeth fights as a serious athlete, without gloves, with bare fists, and with incredible courage, despite the dangerous challenges. When she came on stage, she was also extremely prepared for the fight. Imagine, she was wearing cloth jackets, short skirts, stockings, and shoes, nothing like today's fighting attire. Elizabeth is famous for having her defiantly dramatic statements printed in the newspapers. She even once challenged her rival Anfield, saying, "The blows I shall give him will be harder to digest than any slap he has ever received." Imagine how shocking it must have been for a woman in the 1700s to challenge him so bluntly. Elizabeth not only fought one-on-one, but she and her husband also fought in pairs and even trained young fighters. Can you believe that for nearly 150 years, Elizabeth was the most famous female boxer in the Western world? She fought as the undefeated city champion until 1733. But after her last fight, Elizabeth disappeared from history. After that, women's boxing did not come to the fore until the Regency period, that is, until the early 1800s. In those years, the press and society generally ignored or banned women boxers. Things change a bit in Victorian England. In 1837, a man appears, Donald Walker. He writes a book to popularize exercise in England, British Manly Exercises. The book covers all kinds of physical activity, from rowing to wrestling. Walker's exercise advice is so effective that even the British Army adopts his methods. This fitness craze has spread to the masses, and even women are encouraged to take part in physical activity. This movement is revitalizing women's interest in boxing training, but of course it still takes a lot of courage to step into the ring. So, physical fitness starts to be seen as a sacred duty in the Victorian era. So by 1865, exercise had become an essential part of people's daily lives in England. In Edinburgh, a huge open-air gym for 600 people was built. The number of places similar to the fitness centers we know today increased rapidly, and this paved the way for women to take up sports like boxing. But of course, most women prefer to do simple neck twists and arm swings at home, rather than get in the ring and fight. But no matter what, it's thanks to pioneering women like Elizabeth Wilkinson that women are now at the heart of boxing. You will be surprised when you hear this story. Think of it this way. In the late 1880s, a group of men in New York, including the heavyweight champion of the time, Billy Baker, decided to change the way society viewed women boxers. This rule-breaking movement, followed by men, allowed women's boxing to appear on the scene. But it was not easy. Think first of HattyLeslie. Leslie was performing and fighting in vaudeville shows with her husband. In 1888, Hattie faced Alice Lai in a fight for a $250 cash prize and the title of Women's Champion. The fight took place illegally on Navy Island, an isolated island in the Niagara River, where the women wore thinly lined gloves. Imagine Hattie's nose was broken at the end of the fourth round, but she kept going and finally Alice threw in the towel and surrendered. The fight made headlines in all the major newspapers of the time. However, newspapers like the New York Times described the fight as shameful and portrayed the women in a disgusting portrait. Thus, Hattie's achievement was an important uprising against social norms. Another memorable female boxer was Hattie Stewart. She openly challenged Leslie for the title, even making provocative statements in the newspapers. Stewart's portrait appeared full page in the Police Gazette in 1887. She had trained as a wrestler in Philadelphia and started training at a gymnasium in Virginia with her husband. Imagine, at a time when women were rarely seen not only in the theater or on stage, but even in gyms, Stewart made a serious career in masculine sports like boxing and martial arts. With the support of her husband, she defied the social structures of the time by taking part in boxing matches. While the rivalry between the two women, Leslie and Stewart, continued with challenges and threats in the newspapers, neither side could find a suitable venue for the fight, and neither could find sponsors to cover the costs. In the meantime, Leslie tragically contracted typhoid fever and died while planning a tour in Europe. Thus, Hattie Stewart took over the title from Leslie. The fights and lives of these two women are recorded as one of the most remarkable stories of women's boxing in the late 1800s. Leslie and Stewart were among the first women to be recognized by the bare-knuckle boxing gym, and their skill and stamina inspired the women boxers of today. Women's boxing made its debut as a spectacle at the Olympics in 1904, but it was still not recognized as an official competition. The right for women to box was suppressed for so long that it was only in 1975 that women's boxing licenses were issued in the United States, giving them official access to the sport. Britain, on the other hand, banned women's boxing until 1999. Until 2012, when Britain's Nicola Adams made history by winning the gold medal at the London Olympics. These women did not see boxing as just a sport. For them, boxing was about exploring alternative ways of being a woman, shaking up social norms, and perhaps even becoming a pioneer in the women's rights movement. Until the mid-1800s, women were considered masculine and unfit and ostracized from society. But these fighters showed that women could be just as resilient, strong, and confident